For much of their recent history, the South Pacific islands of Fiji have been ruled by the gun. 4 coups since 1987 have battered the political landscape of this tropical paradise, drawing strong international condemnation. Today, Fiji is under the control of Commodore Frank Bainimarama, who used the army to seize power in 2006. As Prime Minister, he has detained opponents, delayed elections, and suppressed the media. I'm Chan Tao Cho. On this edition of 101 East, we ask him what is the future he sees for his country. Much of the division in Fiji can be traced to the differences between the indigenous and ethnic Indian communities. Commodore Frank Bainimarama has promised to end the racial inequality before holding elections in 2014. But his critics say that's too long to wait and that he just wants to hold on to power. We'll hear from him shortly, but first, we explore the race relations in Fiji, so often used as a political card.
FBCL News and Sports. Good morning at 6 o'clock. I'm Kali Kandorovatu with the news desk. The Education Ministry will use the new geographical classification system to replace the ethnic classifications in determining the intake for both the Lautoka Teachers College and...
In the everyday level, the ethnic groups, there's no differences. But when it comes to elections, when it comes to political parties, people then get into these distortions. And that is not conducive to running a modern nation state.
More than a third of the 900,000 people in Fiji are ethnic Indians, brought in by the British to work in sugarcane plantations more than 100 years ago. Their descendants have become very much a part of the country. Fiji gained independence from the British in 1970, and today the ethnic Indians make up most of the well-heeled among the business community. They say their culture has helped them to accumulate wealth.
This has been indoctrinated into us by our parents and our grandparents. Same thing I'd like to pass on to my children and grandchildren. It's you can say it's a cultural aspect that we have inherited. With politics, it doesn't really matter to us. As a businessman, it will not matter to me as long as the country is governed properly. My business acumen tells me that whatever the environment, if I can be successful, that's the way I should be striving.
There are several customary cultural practices of the Fijians which discourages them from becoming business people because they're very communal oriented. If any businessman becomes successful, then all their relatives and their extended family come and camp on them, and the demands put on them by the churches and all that means that it's very difficult for indigenous Fijian people to accumulate and become wealthy.
The differences between the two main ethnic groups have led many politicians to play the race card for support from the indigenous Melanesians. Under the previous electoral system, a legacy of the British colonial days, people often voted for leaders from their own ethnic groups. This led to election results split down racial lines. The SDL party of former Prime Minister Lesenia Ngarase, who was deposed in the 2006 coup, is known for drawing support from Melanesian communities.
What Ngarase did was he allowed everybody to come into this country, enjoy the business opportunities that were available, enjoy economic prosperity. But what he wanted was the sovereignty of this country to remain with the indigenous owners. We've been given this right and this privilege by the Almighty to live in this 300 group of islands and enjoy the wealth and the resources that is here. And I think it's only proper that we rule our country the way we want it to be done.
You cannot run a modern nation state when you have political parties that only cater for specific ethnic groups. To put into practical terms, when there's potholes in that road, who will you appeal to only? Will you be concerned about the entire street, or will you only be concerned about those who just voted for you? So what it does is, it does not allow for national policies being developed.
It's all tied up with this Fijian ethno-nationalism, where the rhetoric, during the 2000 coup was that, well, we cannot have an Indo-Fijian prime minister in this country, and that a government with a large number of Indo-Fijians in it will be eroding the rights of Fijians, their land and all that.
But the ethnic tensions that led to the 2000 coup were never resolved, despite a return to civilian rule. A subsequent coup was launched on December 2006.
As of 6 o'clock this evening, the military has taken over the government.
Fiji remains under Commodore Bainimarama's martial law, despite a ruling in April this year that the 2006 coup was illegal. The judges who made the ruling were sacked by the president, who reappointed Bainimarama Prime Minister. The military chief had initially promised to end ethnic division and hold elections this year. He's postponed any return to democracy to September 2014.
Commodore Bainimarama says he reiterates that government has the legal right to deny any organisation the right to hold any public meetings.
We are being suppressed. Democracy has been raped. We are being led by a dictator, and it does not augur well for Fiji's relations with its international communities.
Indeed, its neighbours have isolated Fiji. It became the first nation to be suspended from the Pacific Islands Forum for human rights abuses. Lacking confidence in the country, foreign investors are also holding back and depriving the country of foreign exchange earnings, forcing the Prime Minister to devalue the currency twice in recent times.
We don't see that there's going to be any great recovery of foreign exchange earnings. Sure, prices of everything have gone up. The cost of living for the poor has really shot up. Poverty has increased probably from what 34% it was, say, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's probably about 45 to 50% now, a conservative estimate.
Also, the military government has hauled up dozens of dissidents and censored the media. Journalists were reluctant to be interviewed, fearing a similar fate. The Law Society president says the judiciary has also been subjected to suppression.
The Fiji Court of Appeal decision, which went against the government, and they didn't like that, and so they got rid of the Court of Appeal. Now, recently, like I said, they've sacked the chief magistrate. Due process has not been given to the magistrate. Now, if you don't have due process, isn't that the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law being affected?
Amanatave Vio is a farmer deeply disappointed by the rule of law. He remembers how soldiers stormed the house and took his nephew away at 5 o'clock one morning. On the 5th of January 2007, Nimilote Verabasanga died in military custody from severe injuries to his internal organs. This was the first killing by the security forces after the military seized power the month before.
No one from the military came to tell us what he did or what went wrong. Not one person. The police informed us he died, but no one told us what happened.
They finally knew the full story in April this year, when the soldier responsible was sentenced to 3 years in jail for manslaughter. By then, Verabasanga's father had died of old age, months after his son's arrest.
That's our boy, you know. It's no good that the sentencing took so long. My brother thought of it a lot. He took it with him to his death. He left not knowing if those responsible for the death of his son would be punished. The sentence was too light. We don't agree with it. As his uncle, it was a blow to me.
The convicted soldier told the court that Verabasanga, an indigenous Fijian, had harassed Indian tenants on his land, something the family denies. But it reopens the wounds of ethnic divide, a divide that Commodore Bainimarama has promised to bridge.
Commodore Bainimarama says. Commodore Bainimarama adds that government is firm. The Prime Minister has confirmed that a decision will be finalised soon.
To change racial mindsets, the Prime Minister has much work to do. Regardless of any reform to the electoral system, many indigenous Fijians in rural areas like Inoke Dayo would only trust a fellow Melanesian to lead them.
We live in our land, we plant our food. When people come outside, we invite them to come. I want to vote for the Fijian leaders. They'll take care of their own race. That's what I believe. Every people will take care of their own race.
Finally, in sports, Fiji-born All Black Josepata Rokothoko has been recalled into the New Zealand's.
Perhaps the one aspect of Fiji that has no racial divide could be rugby, the national sport. For its long-term stability, the country will need its leaders to work as a team and pull off the right political set plays. Joining us today to speak about the situation in Fiji is the Fijian Prime Minister, Commodore Frank Bainimarama. Prime Minister, thank you very much for sharing your time.
Thank you.
Now, first of all, you staged the coup in 2006 to overthrow an elected government based on grounds that its policies, as well as the electoral system then, were racially divisive. You said that you would hold elections this year. Why has the election date now been moved to September 2014?
The date, March 2009, was announced by me in the Forum Island countries in Tonga. So that the international community, there was a lot of pressure on Fiji and the Forum from the international community about the date for election. To take out this pressure from the international community, I'll say March 2009. But on the understanding that there was flexibility in the date, and that if we were not ready by March 2009, we would say we were not ready by March 2009 when we would move it.
Okay. Now, how do you then convince your critics that this delay is not just a way for your military government to hang on to power?
Well, there's a slight difference in that. The 2009 was announced by me from pressure from the international community. The 2014 is a mandate given to me by His Excellency the President. That's a difference.
So why do you need to wait until 2012 to start working on the new constitution?
Well, we've been given time to come up with an election in 2014. But we've also been given a mandate to right the economy. So we're going to put a lot of emphasis on righting the economy in the next 2-3 years to bring about a conducive environment so we can have an election.
Okay, we'll take a short break now. When we come back, we continue our conversation with the Prime Minister of Fiji, Commodore Frank Bainimarama. Stay with 101 East.